Back again with some more Irish guy reacting to top 10 US hurricanes, top 10 worst US hurricanes. So of course, America has weather more flipping ADHD, more sporadic than a flipping, asylum center. But the people that live there, great people. We all know, of course, I've been there a lot, guys, but the weather there is insane, bro. In the north, it's really cold, freezing, snow, and in the south, it's like roasting hot, never rains, never anything. Then obviously in the southeast, Florida, they have flipping like tropical weather, so they have a crazy climate. From the east coast to the west coast to the north to the south, all different climates in under one big massive country. So today we're about to find out what the top 10 of those were. I know one of them must be Hurricane Katrina that hit Louisiana, killed millions of people. That state still hasn't recovered from Katrina in 2005, guys. So hopefully this one shows us the even more crazy hurricanes. So let's get to it, man. Drop a comment down below. Make sure to subscribe, guys. Got that 100K. We want to try to get to that milli mark. Much love from Ireland to, of course, the America, my number one fan base, my number one subscriber base on YouTube. So let's go.
The United States is just a natural disaster prone country. You got tornadoes, wildfires, even freaking volcanoes on rare occasions. Can't forget about Mount St. Helens. But out of all the natural disasters, one in particular rises above the rest. Hurricanes are by far the costliest, most destructive, and deadliest natural disasters on record here in the US. Well, at least until the next asteroid impact. And today we're going over the top 10 worst historic hurricanes. We'll be looking at 3 factors to determine these ratings: cost, death toll, and power. And we're starting the list with number 10, the very recent Hurricane
Ian. I've never heard of Hurricane Ian. 2022, that's super recent. Do I remember that?
Hurricane Ian that spanned from September 23rd to October 1st in 2022. Hurricane Ian was, at its peak, a Category 5 major hurricane with a minimum barometric pressure of 937 millibars.
Bro, Category 10 is insane. Or sorry, Category 5. That's like complete destruction. If you're in that, you will die.
Peak wind speeds from Ian measured in the 160 mile per hour range.
160?
Initially forming over the Caribbean Sea, Hurricane Ian would make landfall as a Category 3 hurricane over western Cuba on September 27th, where 5 fatalities would occur. After passing over Cuba, Ian would strengthen to a Category 5 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. As it slowly approached the U.S. mainland, the hurricane weakened to a Category 4 right before striking southwest Florida on September 28th.
Man, Florida has a rough time. Florida always gets hit.
Ian then tore its way all the way across the Florida Peninsula to the Atlantic, where it would then swing back around, striking the coast of South Carolina near the city of Georgetown on September 30th as a much weaker Category 1 hurricane. Overall, Hurricane Ian caused a total of $117 million worth of damage, making it the 3rd costliest hurricane of all time.
That's crazy.
And while Ian did cause some damage in the Carolinas and in Cuba, we really need to focus on one state in particular, and that is Florida, because it was here that by far the worst damage occurred. The hurricane claimed 161 lives, but 150 of these deaths occurred in Florida alone. The city of Fort Myers and its surrounding suburbs in Lee County saw 72 deaths. This high death toll was caused by a variety of factors, one being the 15-foot storm surge that flowed onto Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, and Bonita Springs. The flooding destroyed 52,000 buildings, and it even caused the Sanibel Causeway to collapse, cutting off road access to the island. And it wasn't just the coast of Florida that was heavily affected. Large amounts of rainfall caused major inland flooding, and there were even several tornadoes spawned, particularly in southern Florida near Miami. Due to the significance of the storm, the name Ian has been retired by the World Meteorological Organization. Moving on to number 9, Hurricane Camille. Forming on August 14th, 1969 and lasting until the 22nd, Camille would peak as a Category 5 major hurricane with a minimum barometric low pressure reading of 900 millibars, making it one of the strongest hurricanes on today's list. This hurricane featured wind speeds near 175 miles per hour. It also featured
170 miles per hour is crazy.
A very similar path to so many infamous Atlantic hurricanes, forming in the Caribbean Sea and then moving up towards the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida.
Bro, that southeast of America is just battered by hurricanes. Completely, that is the worst place to live if you guys don't want to get hit by a hurricane. Like, the southeast is horrendous.
While hurricane formation was slow at first, environmental factors such as a warm environment and moisture over the Gulf of Mexico allowed Camille to quickly strengthen to a strong Category 5 hurricane with wind speeds near 170 miles per hour. Forecasters initially thought that Camille would head towards the east, towards Florida, similar to Ian in the last century. However, they would be a bit off with their forecast. Here's a chart of the forecasted path. See these lines over here? Those are the forecasted paths of Hurricane Camille. And this line on the far left, that's the path that Hurricane Camille actually took. This meant that a lot of people in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana were not properly prepared and were caught off guard when on August 18th, Camille made landfall in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi at its full strength, with the wind speeds around 175 miles per hour. These high winds wrecked the coast of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, destroying thousands of buildings, resulting in the loss of 143 lives in these three states. One urban legend tells about a supposed hurricane party at an apartment in Pass Christian, Mississippi, where 23 attendees died and only one made it out alive.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that as a kid, guys. I remember reading about that in Horrible Geography, those books.
Or this urban legend has mostly been debunked. There was some good news. Since Camille was traveling at such a fast rate, there was little rainfall on the coast. However, the same could not be said for Virginia. By the time the storm reached Virginia on August 20th, its pace had slowed significantly, leading to huge amounts of rainfall resulting in massive flooding and landslides in Virginia. In fact, more people died from blunt force trauma caused by the landslides in Virginia than those who were on the coast.
See, we've never even had a landslide. We've never had a landslide in Ireland. We've never had hurricanes, F5 hurricanes, F4 hurricanes. We've never had any of this stuff in Ireland at all. It's crazy, guys. This is just like such an American thing. This is wild.
Overall, 153 people would perish in Virginia, 123 people in Nelson County alone. 21 of these victims were all from the same family, the Huffmans. Hurricane Camille remains the deadliest natural disaster to ever hit the state of Virginia. Overall, Hurricane Camille claimed 259 lives, and due to this high death toll, the name Camille has been retired by the WMO. Number 8 is one that I'm sure many of us remember quite well, and that is Hurricane Harvey in 2017.
I do remember this one. This was back in college, guys. This was bad. Any hurricane that America gets, we get like the tail end of it as well, because the Gulf Stream travels from Mexico all the way up to like north of Ireland, basically the north of Europe.
Hurricane Harvey only peaked as a Category 4 hurricane, which is still very strong. The hurricane is tied as the costliest hurricane on record, causing $125 billion worth of damage. The storm that would become Harvey first began as a tropical storm near the Lesser Antilles Islands, but would eventually weaken back into a tropical depression as it crossed the Caribbean Sea. It would eventually make landfall over the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, but then suddenly pivot north into the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico.
Because when the warm waters hit the cold air, it just makes a massive tornado.
Warm waters helped the hurricane to quickly strengthen to a Category 4 strength, with a minimum low pressure reading of 937 millibars. Harvey continued north until it struck the coast of southeast Texas. There's one factor that makes Harvey stick out from the other hurricanes on this list, and that is the insane amount of rain that was dropped on Texas. I mean, holy goodness, the amount of rainfall is ridiculous. Look at this radar imagery. Watch this radar loop of Hurricane Harvey. The hurricane makes landfall over Corpus Christi, and then it just stops. Like, it literally just pauses over Corpus Christi. It's crazy. And then it slowly picks up the pace and slowly moves to the north. Now specifically look at the precipitation over Houston.
Oh yeah, I remember the rain that was in Houston and the rain that was in America at the time. Like, all these YouTubers had like everything flooded in their area. It was just crazy, man. Crazy amount of flooding.
Oh my word. It's insane. 60 inches of rain were recorded in Nederland, Texas. All of this rainfall obviously led to a lot of flooding and hundreds of thousands of homes being destroyed. Hurricane Harvey remains the wettest hurricane on record in the US. Rain wasn't the only damaging factor of Hurricane Harvey. There were also 22 weak tornadoes throughout the state. Overall, 107 people would tragically lose their lives in the US. 103 of these people were in Texas. Hurricane 7 is actually a weak hurricane, only a Category 1, but before we get to number 7, a quick word from today's sponsor.
Yeah, guys, Hurricane 7 is crazy. Let's get it, guys.
Back to number 7, the weak but significant Category 1 Hurricane Agnes.
Let's get on to all the hurricanes, the top 5 hurricanes. I want to see some actual drama. Come on.
Before goes to the 1935 Labor Day Category 5 hurricane that formed on August 29th and dissipated on September 10th. At its peak strength, the Labor Day hurricane featured 185 mile per hour wind gusts with a minimum.
That is just insane wind, guys. Like, the most we get in Ireland, guys, is like 160 kilometers. 150 kilometers, 120 kilometers, something like that. That's still really heavy. That like destroys a lot of stuff here. But 300 kilometers, that's like astronomical.
Low pressure reading of 892 millibars, making this hurricane the strongest, most powerful hurricane on record in the U.S. The storm initially formed to the east of the Bahamas. As it headed west towards the Florida Keys, the hurricane quickly intensified to a very powerful Category 5. At this point, it traveled off the Gulf Coast of Florida, up through the Panhandle and over Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia, and then finally back out into the Atlantic Ocean, where it would eventually dissipate. The 1935 Labor Day hurricane was not only extremely powerful, but it was also very deadly, claiming 423 lives. The most impacted were the Florida Keys, specifically the upper keys of Long Key and Craig Key, where an 18-foot storm surge swept over the islands and the very southern tip of the Florida Peninsula. The town of Isla Mirada took a direct hit and was completely destroyed. The railroad line connecting the islands to the Florida mainland was also destroyed, preventing aid from responding quickly. Today, situated in Isla Mirada, close to the location of the town's post office at mile marker 82 East on US Highway 1, stands a monument that was created by the Florida Division of the Federal Art Project. This memorial marks the location and burial of the ashes of over 300 victims. Going into the top three, these storms get much more serious and much more deadly. Starting off with number 3, a hurricane that we are all very familiar with. I'm of course talking about Hurricane Katrina.
This is the one I was saying, Hurricane Katrina is super deadly. They still haven't recovered from that, apparently, 15 years later. Crazy.
2005. It's probably the most well-known hurricane event, and for a good reason. It is tied as the costliest hurricane on record, causing $125 billion worth of damage. At its peak, Katrina was a Category 5 major hurricane with wind speeds around 175 miles per hour and a very low minimum pressure of 902 millibars. Hurricane Katrina originally formed near the Bahamas on August 23rd. 2 days later, on August 25th, it was strengthened to a Category 1 hurricane just before striking the east coast of Florida. Katrina weakened as it crossed the Florida Peninsula, but once the storm was over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, it rapidly strengthened from a Category 3 to a Category 5 hurricane in less than 9 hours. The hurricane then headed towards that really dangerous low-altitude coast of Mississippi and Louisiana. On August 29th, Katrina, now a Category 3 hurricane, slammed into New Orleans and the surrounding Gulf Coast. The high storm surge penetrated the various flood protection barriers, flooding 80% of the city. The devastation can clearly be seen on Google Earth.
80% of the city, guys. That is insane, bro.
The story of Katrina is really about the failures of the New Orleans flood walls.
Yeah, the flood walls was the major one. I remember reading about this. I did geography in secondary school for leaving cert for like the end of school exams, and like I remember this is like the deadliest hurricane, guys, because all the flood walls just collapsed. So the whole state just got flooded. The whole city got flooded.
Like, look at these levee breaches on Google Earth. This barge right here smashed into this levee, destroying it, flooding the entire neighborhood. There were flooded interstates. Walmarts had been flooded, the Superdome was heavily damaged, and there's a lot of drama around the Superdome. I want to eventually do like a Google Earth video on Hurricane Katrina, kind of like my old school videos, just going over the damage and the recovery. So stay tuned for that. Overall, 1,800 plus lost their lives from Katrina, and 1,577 people lost their lives in Louisiana alone. That's a huge amount. A death toll on the US mainland like this has not been seen since the 1928 Okeechobee hurricane. Speaking of the 1928 Okeechobee hurricane, that is number 2 on today's list.
Never heard about this one.
Very powerful, Category 5 major hurricane with estimated wind speeds between 160 and 170 miles per hour. This hurricane had a minimum low pressure reading of 928 millibars. This monster hurricane formed on September 6 off the coast of West Africa, way further away than any of the other previous entries. You might be wondering, how on earth were we able to track a hurricane in 1928?
Yeah.
Well, it's because there were ships throughout the Atlantic that tracked the storm's progress.
Jesus, there were ships that were tracking it across the Atlantic. That's wild.
As the storm crossed the Atlantic and approached the Lesser Antilles Islands, it rapidly strengthened to what would be a modern-day Category 4 hurricane.
Whoa.
The hurricane swung north and struck Puerto Rico, where a wind station measured 200-mile-per-hour winds. However, this
322 kilometers.
rating is disputed and it's believed to be inaccurate, but still, obviously there were high winds regardless. The hurricane continued north over the Bahamas, where it would eventually make landfall in southeast Florida near West Palm Beach as a Category 4. The hurricane would then travel inland and slowly weaken as it struck the communities around Lake Okeechobee. Now in the Caribbean and the Bahamas, the hurricane claimed 1,600 lives, but in Florida, in the US, the hurricane claimed 2,511 lives, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters on record for the United States.
That's crazy.
2,500 of these deaths all occurred in Florida. Storm surge mixed with high winds destroyed thousands of buildings near the coast, specifically near Miami. But the majority of the fatalities came from the heavily populated southern portion of Lake Okeechobee, where the lake's dike collapsed. It's estimated that at least 1,800 lives were lost from the resulting flooding. Unfortunately, there are also major racial issues in connection to the 1928 Okeechobee hurricane. Many of the victims were black migrant farm workers and did not receive proper burials or even recognition. However, thankfully, they would eventually be recognized thanks to people like Robert Hazard, who helped establish proper memorials, as well as African-American writer Zora Neale Hurston, who wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God, a novel exploring the hurricane's impact on black migrant workers.
Crazy.
Before we get to number one, a couple of honorable mentions. There's the 1899 Puerto Rico hurricane that resulted in 3,885 deaths. There's Hurricane Sandy in 2012 with 254 deaths.
I remember that hurricane as well.
150 of these being in the U.S. This was number 11 on my list, and it was actually number 10 for half of the time I was editing this video, but I kept going back and forth. It just barely missed the top 10. Other honorable mentions include Hurricane Andrew in 1993, Hurricane Irma in 2017, Hurricane Wilma in 2005, the Miami hurricane of 1926, and Hurricane Floyd in 1999. But now, on to number one. Finally, we have made it to the number one worst U.S. hurricane on record. The infamous 1900 Galveston hurricane.
Never heard of this one ever before, guys. Galveston hurricane. What is that? Galveston, where's that?
A tragic storm that claimed somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 lives. At its peak strength, the Galveston hurricane had a minimum barometric pressure of 936 millibars, with wind speeds in the 145 mile per hour range. Now, we've seen stronger hurricanes, but the damage caused by this hurricane is ridiculous. The storm remained relatively weak as it passed over the Lesser Antilles Islands and Cuba, but like so many other hurricanes, it rapidly strengthened over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. From there, it would strengthen to what would be a modern-day Category 4 hurricane, and then smash into the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana. This same area that we've talked about so much in this video. This is not a good area. Do not live in this area of the US. The hurricane continued inland and even remained a tropical storm all the way up till Iowa on September 12th.
What?
As you could probably
That's so far north.
guess from the name, the island city of Galveston, Texas was the worst hit by the hurricane. A 12-foot storm surge swept over the city, flooding it completely, destroying 7,000 buildings. It's worth noting that the highest point in Galveston in 1900 was 9 feet above sea level.
Oh.
So yeah, the entire town was flooded. To make matters
So
worse,
yeah, the entire town was very low sea level, so it got flooded. Like when you live on a hill, we actually live on a hill here in the west coast of Ireland. So if there's any flooding, it really won't reach us at all, but it will reach houses down the way that are like on the lower levels. So gotta be super careful about that one.
worse, the city and much of the Texas coast in general endured 120 mile per hour wind gusts. Galveston was supposed to be a huge hub for Texas, a large and very important city. However, after the hurricane, many investors decided to take their money to the nearby city of Houston instead. So Houston became the hub for that area of Texas. While the death
Yeah, Houston's really rich, isn't it?
toll varies, the most common number is around 8,000, making the Galveston hurricane the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history.
That is crazy, guys.
That concludes today's video. Let me know your
Unbelievable. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Whatever country you're from, I'm guessing you're from the US watching this. But guys, any hurricane that we have here in Ireland, we don't get half that sort of damage. I mean, the damage that occurs in the US and Puerto Rico and these other countries is just astronomical, guys. And God bless myself for not living there. I love you all, man. Drop a comment down below. Let me know the deadliest hurricanes in your country. And I'll see you guys in the next one, man. Peace.